Welcome to the Connectivity Cloud Podcast, the podcast that provides expert insights into the cloud and IT landscape. I'm Mark Dembo, and each month we'll explore key topics like scaling secure infrastructure, tackling emerging risks, and staying ahead of the latest trends. Whether you're managing multi-vendor environments or navigating cloud modernization, this is the show for you, delivering practical advice for today's decision makers. I'm your host, Mark Dembo, and today I'm joined by Mostafa Hassanin, Group CISO at SMG Swiss Marketplace Group, and Sam Rhea, VP of Emerging Technology at Cloudflare. Thank you so much for joining, you two. Much appreciated. People call you Mosty, so I will also do that to Mostafa. Would you be so kind and introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Mark, and thanks for having me, of course, first of all. And yes, you're right. People call me Mosty. That's for short for the longer version of the name, Mostafa Hassanin. So first of all, let me start by the studies. I studied computer science, security, as well as business. And I have been working in security for a little over 13 years and in different industries, online marketplaces, banking, finance, as well as consultancy. And now, thanks to SMG, I'm in online marketplaces since 5 years, and I head the team, or I lead the team of security, trust, and safety for the whole group, and the group CISO for the group as well.
Super lucky to have you here, Mosty. For people that don't know, what does SMG do?
Right. So some people maybe also let me target the wider audience. So let's say if people are familiar with eBay, Craigslist, and the similar platforms, this is pretty much the same, maybe a little bit difference in the business model, but it's the same. We facilitate like buying and selling on multiple verticals, as we would like to call them, like automotive, real estate, finance and insurance, and general marketplace. People in the DACH region may be familiar with the brands like Ricardo, Tutti, AutoScout, EmoScout, Anibase, HomeGate, etc.
Great. That sounds like a really interesting company to work for. Also with us, Sam. Sam, I would also love for you to share a little bit who you are.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. If you are listening to this and not watching it, Musty and I are both wearing matching black sweaters. We look very cool on the video if anybody wants to change over to video for that reason. My name is Sam. I'm a VP of product here at Cloudflare. In our Lisbon office, which almost 6 years ago I moved here to open up with our CTO John and a handful of others. It's a really beautiful space if anyone's ever coming through Lisbon. I've been at Cloudflare for about 7 years, where I've worked on any number of products, from launching our domain registrar to building out what has become Cloudflare Zero Trust and Cloudflare One. Right now I'm back in the laboratory working on a bunch of different new ideas and new technologies that we are experimenting with for Cloudflare, with other software companies. But I sure do like it at Cloudflare, and I'm excited to be here.
Really cool, and I'm excited to have you both here. In this episode, we'll talk a little bit about the AI hype and try to cut through it. We'll explore real challenges and also the opportunities that organizations are facing, from basically improving business operations or enhancing security, but we'll also talk about the dirty stuff like shadow IT and the risk that comes with it. So if you're a CIO, a CISO, or a business leader, I hope that you really can learn something from this episode. And with that, I would love to start and want our listeners to get to know you guys. Where do you guys come from when it comes to AI? Do you use personally or professionally AI-enabled tools already, or have you even built your, let's say, own little AI apps? I heard it's easier than ever to actually build something. Mosty, how does that answer look like for you?
All of the above, basically. So let me also shed some light on the daily, because or the daily tasks, because this is what has changed in the last couple of years, as we evolve with the new tools that were available. So for me, on a personal level, I do content processing daily with ChatGPT or other similar tools, like creating slides, scraping a page, summarizing a document. It's making my job and my life a hell of a lot easier. And also on the security, I would use the broader term, like, AI in general, or Gen AI. I also use it in the company from trainings and simulations to detection and response. We're going to get a bit into that as we go today. And in the product as well, again, detection, response, new features. So yeah, I consider myself a technology enthusiast, let's say, and whatever the technology throws at us in a year or two or a month or two, I'm in.
That sounds like a really open-minded approach, and I like that you're at the cutting edge. That is really interesting. Sam, I follow you on Twitter or X nowadays, so I know a little bit that you built some personal tiny AI apps. Outside of that, like, how does AI influence your work potentially? What do you do with it, especially if you work as an VP for Emerging Technology? I guess it has been front and center of your daily work.
Yeah, you're right. I've built a lot of silly little AI apps that have dozens, seriously, dozens of users. It's incredible, the growth. Like I said earlier, based here in Lisbon, but from America, a lot of visitors into Lisbon. People are excited to come to Portugal. They always want recommendations. And I loaded up a particular AI app, runs on Cloudflare, that literally asks people their preferences, gives them recommendations. There's little fun use cases like that. Of course, way more impactful ways to use it at work. The biggest trend I've seen, and I don't want to call this necessarily co-pilot, because I think that term gets overused, but where I've really seen it add a lot of value inside of our organization when we're building internal tools on top of our own inference layer is helping people become context aware rapidly. So in some situations I've seen some of the internal tools that we have will help somebody coming into a support ticket suddenly ingest all sorts of information that's been summarized and analyzed by these tools. And the goal isn't to then deliver a robot response to the customer, right? Because all of us, I think, know when we're being talked to by a bot. The goal is to, when that human support agent approaches the ticket, maybe the 45 minutes they used to have to do just catching up with all the detail and the complexity is now cut down to 6 minutes, 7 minutes, because all the important points are highlighted for them. Some of the additional diagnostics are performed, and they can get right into having that relationship human to human with the customer. There's all sorts of little experiments going on in the organization where we're thinking about AI in that way, not as a way to replace how we connect with other humans, but as a way to make it easier for us to connect with other humans, because we're automating away some of what was previously the kind of rote work to prepare for that connection.
That is super interesting. I feel like everyone can relate, unless you've been living under the rock, a rock, basically. I feel like everyone has seen those screenshots of like customer service bots, and then they ask, hey, can you help me with a refund? And the next thing is, can you code a website for me? And then you see that immediate code snippet coming up. So I feel like the approach of having a human in the loop, or the AI doing the research and the prep, but then the human is basically still in the driver's seat, is this thing that many organizations do. And I mean, like, is it all about reputational risk? When we talk about reputational risk, there's also other types of risks that are out there, and some of it is like security risk. I'm curious to know, what are you most concerned about? Is external AI power threat, so to say weaponized AI? I use AI, Gen AI, to do attacks against an online asset or internet asset? Or are we talking more about like the misuse of an AI tool? So for instance, there's one email with the really important company secrets or the customer details that is going to OpenAI because someone or another provider, whatever it might be, because some employee just pasted it into an external tool against all policies that you might have in your company. Musty, based on your day-to-day, what are you most worried about?
Lack of awareness, lack of processes in general, because I tell you what, look, I mean, AI is making a lot of things easier, absolutely, no doubt about that. But copy pasting a piece of code to a public forum is, to me, the same as copy pasting the same piece of code into ChatGPT or anything else. We're still abiding by the the rules or the CIA rubric, the classic one from the 80s, and it's about like protecting the information. What has changed is just the medium, the channels, etc. The rubric evolves, but it doesn't change the fundamentals. So for me, the lack of awareness when a person is copy pasting a piece of code to somewhere, it still exists, regardless where would that land. The lack of awareness also in very basic fundamentals of security, how to code right, how to do this, how not to hard code secrets, how it's still the same, So the thing that I'm most worried about is the lack of awareness and the lack of processes in general to, say, govern all of these new tools, processes that comes with it and usage.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting. Sam, I know that one of the products or technology areas you focus on is zero trust. And as part of this role that you had, you talked of dozens and dozens and dozens of customers regarding their security setup, right? What do you think, or what worries you more? Is it weaponized AI? So basically, where I learned this term or this platform for the first time, warm GPT and so on? Or are you saying, hey, the misuse of AI tools, code being sent potentially anywhere, someone copying an email somewhere that it might not should go? What is the thing where you say, oh yeah, that changed?
The thing that scares me to death about these AI tools is the same thing that scared me to death about every SaaS tool that has ever gotten popular. And it is the careless mistakes we make with integrations or kinds of add-on tools. So the reality is a lot of firms are picking an AI vendor and getting an enterprise version of it. So the companies buying enterprise OpenAI licenses, enterprise Claude licenses, or they're running their internal AI workloads on Cloudflare Workers AI, where they have total control over the model and the data. Regardless, a lot of these companies are getting control over how their employees use AI. And the reality is the risk of somebody putting sensitive information inside of one of these tools, it is a real risk, and people need to be very respectful of the data that they're entrusted with. But a lot of these kinds of risks are being mitigated by these enterprise agreements or things of that nature. It's very similar to using Gmail or Office 365 for your business. You're trusting somebody else and you're signing into an agreement with them. What terrifies me is somebody in any organization starts using one of these tools, whether it's the enterprise version of OpenAI or something of that nature, and they find some integration or plugin or add-on that very deceptively says, hey, I'm an add-on into your IDE, for example, or in integration with Cursor, right? These AI tools that help you write code. And I do this really great one thing, right? I make JSON pretty easy to read, for example, you name it. And somebody just says, oh, that sounds neat, I'm going to add that in. And the reality is that tool suddenly starts phoning home all the files in your IDE that it's reading because you thought it was this neat little plugin on top of your AI IDE setup. That's where I think you're going to see incidents, is that these tools are so new and they're evolving so fast, and there is so much money funding any number of AI add-on startups every day. I'm sure all of us get a dozen emails about them every day, that it's really hard to know what is a good tool and what is, potentially dangerous tool. And people don't seem to be very diligent about thinking before they add a plugin or an add-on, because they tell themselves, I'm using, the company said I could use enterprise Claude in the same way the company says I can use Gmail. This plugin must be safe because I can find it and it integrates easily. That's where I think you're going to see some of the early disasters of data breaches or ransomware inside of AI usage. It's not that somebody's going to accidentally post, company financials into their enterprise version of OpenAI, and that, the world in which that becomes leaked is a very narrow set of circumstances. But the world where some engineer somewhere adds some integration that's like AI powered into their coding setup, or some accountant somewhere adds some Excel kind of file handler that is AI powered that they think was just a cool startup, and all these are going to phone home with a lot of data. That's where I think people have to be really careful.
And this way, like, AI word becomes like a honeypot, right? So it's like attracting people just to get there, download the tool or use it or install the plugin or whatnot because it promises AI.
Exactly. I mean, you can, I'm almost willing to bet money that the first major Global 2000 or Fortune 500 AI data incident will be some member of the accounting team or the finance team inside of one of these firms got an email about this incredible, you name it, right? Tool that you install on top of your Excel, or tool that you install that, ingests CSV and analyzes your finances for you. And they thought, that's going to make my life way easier. I'm going to be the best accountant in this department as a result of it. And it's going to send every file it reads back home somewhere. And that's, I think you're totally right. The honeypot of, wow, AI, this tool is going to be so useful to me. And no one has a good way of kind of distinguishing good versus bad tools yet.
Now, my question is, you're spot on. I feel like everyone wants to increase their productivity. No one wants to be left behind as well. There's pressure on employees to actually potentially also adopt these kind of tools, right? What can I, as a leader, whether I'm a CISO or I'm a CIO, I work in these organizations, I'm responsible for tooling. What can I do to actually not be the one company that is in the headlines? As like Sam said, right? Anything you would recommend?
I previously spent a few years running our zero trust products here. The recommendation I made, the second most common recommendation I made after add 2FA and integrate it into your access policies. The second most common recommendation I made is think about allow lists rather than deny lists. So with, for example, Cloudflare's DNS filtering, but really any great DNS filtering solution, secure web gateway solutions, you manage these corporate devices. My recommendation to a lot of teams, and this doesn't solve everything, but is instead of blocking known bad domains, only allow known good domains, block everything else. Because the reality is the number of domains or services that somebody should use, that a large organization should use, probably boils down to about 1,000 host names, right? It's your productivity provider like Microsoft 365 or G Suite. It's your Salesforce. It's, a handful of SaaS tools that you support. And maybe it's some news websites that, people want to go read to, x.com, you name it. It's not that long a list though. And a lot of these tools, become just like before AI with some of these kind of honeypot tools or phishing tools, they'll go get a host name that looks like, supercoolaitool.com. Oh, that seems legit. The reality is block everything until somebody comes and raises their hand and then you evaluate it. Because if you just have a process where you say, look, we essentially allow you to go try any tool, but if you want to use it, you need to go through our approval flow. The reality is no one's going to go through that approval flow. They're just going to go use the tool, right? Unless somebody's actively stopping them from doing it. And if you're actively stopping them, then they do have to raise their hand and say, can I please come use this thing? That's a recommendation I have before AI, during AI, after AI, whatever after AI looks like.
Really great. Mosti, what role does also perhaps education and training play in this?
A huge role. Because even now, I'm the CISO of the organization. Am I aware of every little thing? No, right? So I am not aware of every little thing, of course, and could be somewhere, someplace, something being used without also me knowing about it. So this is, we have also to accept this. So in my own point of view is awareness and education, or the human factor, actually, I see it as the first line of defense, not the weakest point. And that means is that we prepare and train the employees, anyone who is interacting, and give them the necessary tools to make their job a lot easier so that they know how to do it. Because, so everyone with the same level of knowledge probably would reach the same decision if they have the same level of knowledge, on average, let's say at least. So if I tell them, okay, here is that, you need to take care of this, take care of that, make sure that this is going in this way. And if they know that they need to look for these things, they themselves will highly likely take the same as the decision that I would take. So this is basically it. And hey, I tell you what, use AI in the training as well. So so use AI in the training, make the training more rewarding, provide an incentive in the training. Is it not like a 15, 20 page document that you need to read through? No. And it's because now the people who are really very well-rounded with AI will take the document, send it to ChatGPT. That's why policies should not be secret. But yeah, so this is how I see it. I see that the education awareness is a major role, also not only to protect the security, but also to see the opportunities in the business of how to use these tools, collective intelligence.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Sam, I got to tell you, I did my research, and I've seen that you authored a blog post around gaining insights and control into AI crawlers. Can you explain a little bit what this post was all about and why perhaps I, as an executive...
So imagine, Mark, you're in Berlin right now, right? Munich, excuse me. Last time I saw you we were in Berlin together. So you're in Munich. Imagine you have a website that is kind of Mark's Insider Guide to Munich, and it becomes a serious revenue stream for you because you sell ads on it, or restaurants sponsor it because they want to be listed in your website. Imagine this becomes a kind of a real source of income for you. Maybe it becomes your full-time job someday. And suddenly, with a lot of these AI tools, instead of going to Google, where I would search, Munich restaurants, and I would see Mark Dembo's Guide to Munich, and I would follow that link, and I would visit it and read it, and you would get ad traffic, or you would get referral traffic. The internet in that model, the free and open internet, works really well because Google is free to me because Google's also selling ads, but it's also surfacing links of great content on the internet that you're making in this situation. And I'm following that great link to that great content. And now you're making money because I'm visiting your site and you're selling ads or referrals. Everybody wins in that relationship. I find great content surfaced by Google and you get ad traffic. The challenge, of course, is, I don't know if you've tried this recently. I have. It's kind of interesting to experiment with, is if I, instead of going to google.com or Bing or whatever, instead of a search engine or going to your website directly because I saw it on Instagram or something, I go to ChatGPT and I just say, give me 5 great restaurants for Munich, and here's my level of price and dietary restrictions. And it gives me 5 great restaurants. I never went to any source of the data for those restaurants, right? The source of the data for those restaurants, of course, was all these different services on the internet going and consuming as much of the internet as they can. Because previously you wanted to be consumed on the internet. Your blog about Munich, you wanted people to read it because that's how you generated ad traffic. So you made it easy to scan. Problem is, of course, now all these different scanning services that power these LLMs are taking your content and repackaging it, and either they're not referencing you at all, or if they do reference you, it's kind of a little source or citation link at the bottom that the reality is no one's really clicking through to anymore. So it's a huge threat to the fundamental economics of the internet, because you can think about this as not just Mark's Guide to Munich, but some of the largest websites on the internet are powered by traffic because they sell, whether it's giant news publications or, destinations about reviews of great technology, you name it. These news organizations, these destinations on the internet are powered by this ad traffic. And if suddenly they are abstracted away and everyone's interface to the rest of the internet becomes these models, there's a real threat to the idea of an open, very, very human internet, because no one's going to have any incentive to publish anything on the internet anymore if all of their content just gets scraped up, repackaged without their citation. And we think that's a real risk because it's a disservice, of course, to the people creating great content. It's also potentially a way for the internet to become smaller and more centralized in ways that I don't think are good for how a free open internet should function. And so what we've done is we've introduced a feature inside of Cloudflare called AI Audit, where it uses our existing reverse proxy and bot management setup to just go and look for the AI tools that are scraping your content. And a lot of times people go in and they see that and they think, oh my gosh, You're telling me that the ByteDance crawler for their LLM is scanning my content how many thousands of times? Like I mentioned earlier, I have a little blog about Lisbon, and it really shocked me. It's kind of weird how often these crawlers are hitting your content. So we want to first just make it transparent to people, because some people don't mind, right? I don't really mind. My blog about Lisbon is just for me and for fun. It's not a source of income for me. But a lot of people do mind, and they should. And so in that situation, what we've made available to them after this transparent report is a single easy button where they go and they can click that button, and Cloudflare's network will block all AI scrapers immediately. And whether they want to do that as a timeout, just say, look, I don't have a good direction I want to take this. I'm just going to press the timeout button until my team can decide how we want to handle these AI scrapers. Or maybe they want to push that, and then they want to go to these scrapers and sign a deal directly with them and say, hey, look, I've blocked all AI bots. If you want the great content I have here, we need to come to some sort of agreement. And then once you come to that agreement, you can again use Cloudflare's network to allow the bots from just that particular provider to hit your content. We think it's really important. It's free and available to everybody. We think it's one of a valuable tool to making sure that the internet as we know it, an open internet where people want to publish great content, continues to thrive, as opposed to this kind of dark, small internet you might head to in a world where everyone's content is aggregated away from the publication.
Wow, that is super interesting. And I think I never thought about the economics of the internet that way and how the landscape is being disrupted actually right now. And it's just happening in front of our eyes. But yeah, if you're not thinking about it, if your income doesn't depend on it, perhaps not crazy relevant, as you said, for your Lisbon blog. So I know that I will definitely look into my new Mark Guide for Munich blog and look into the stats there. But if I'm a major company that is depending on the traffic going actually to the website, I think as always, right, it starts with observability, but then you also need to take control. Same as like every cyber defense or in general, right? First get observability and then you can take action on that. Quite interesting. We talked about, Sam, you just mentioned the economics of the internet changing. In general, I think the way we work also changes, right? You mentioned that, hey, we use all Gen AI in some form or fashion. Let's look a little bit into the future. 5 years from now, how will organizations, so it's 2030, how will organization look like that successfully leverage AI? What will have changed? Perhaps also, Mosti, you work as a CISO. How will security orgs be different?
Also, one thing to add, by the way, it's Spare2F in 2026, around 90% of the content online will be generated. So we need, yeah, exactly. It will be generated. It won't be a human like writing these things. So it's also a call for everyone to start thinking. I know you asked about, security, but let me also, zoom out a bit and then start from the business as well. Then we need to start thinking about sustainable and resilient business models that can cope up with that, because we're still playing by the same rules in product development or business rules, and we need to cope up and evolve with that. I'm using this word a lot, evolve, because it's really the key highlight for me. We need to evolve on multiple aspects. So now we started with the business. You need to have like the resilient business model. The sustainable one is like, one would ask like, okay, like why I am or why my business depend on this, that the content, no one gets access to it. Okay, can I do it in a different way where I can also monetize it? These questions, this train of thoughts needs to appear a lot more. And then we get into the security aspect of things. Of course, it's still evolving, the ecosystem. No one can say for sure, but the way I see it is that in the future, I see that a lot of things will be facilitated or done by the AI, especially the things that are very human intensive. Like, for example, like we use it in detection and response, and it saved us let's say hundreds of hours a month, because they are all logs. You don't need a human looking at the logs. Then let the AI do the logs, and you come in with your expertise, the human touch into it. So this is also part of evolving, is that in the security sphere, when it comes to AI, we need to have this mindset and evolve with it. So a lot of things will be, it will increase productivity, and also I think what we need to do is that we become more resilient in general, also in security. We be cyber fit, survival of the fittest, because those who can, let's say, recover quickly from attacks, regardless what type of that attack, and lose the least from the attacks, and the business model is not disrupted by the AI train, they are the ones that are going to survive, in my opinion. And concretely, the question or the answer to that is being adaptive, or doing adaptive security. So for me now, we're talking also about whitelists, blacklists, true or false. I think the world will change more into probabilities. It's like you would have a percentage, so you would need to adopt a risk, and you would need to be automating how the risk is being calculated. Like when you access a website, it is going to, or do an operation, it is going to calculate the risk, and then based on that, it will trigger the appropriate challenge. We do that already in our infrastructure and some of our platforms, and it's so far it's going well, and will keep evolving as well.
Okay, really interesting. Yes, I think we need to evolve. We need to evolve our business models, processes, and also, I guess, the way we work. Sam, how does the year 2030 look like for you, and how will AI have changed it?
So I'm going to not be one of those pessimists and say that by then AI will have taken control of the launch codes and yada yada. But I do. The thing that excites me, beyond some of the kind of more fun use cases, you can imagine a world where, of course, AI is really helpful to people dealing with a particular rare disease, and they need to, review it, or they're learning something new. There are really fun use cases. The thing I think about the most in the enterprise is that in the year 2030, a lot of enterprises look more like law firms than the kind of current very hierarchical software company structure or large enterprise structure, where you have people reporting to people reporting to people reporting to people. And it's this kind of big, almost inspired by the military hierarchy, bureaucracy in a lot of these firms. The reason people have teams of teams of teams is scale, right? You're a leader, and you need a lot of people because you obviously can't be everywhere at once. If you're familiar with a lot of how law firms operate, and when I was 15, I was a delivery person in a city in downtown Texas for a law firm. So I had a very silly window into this. It was very, very hot to be a delivery person in Texas in the summer. But anyway, yeah, it was very miserable. But if you think about how these law firms operate, you have kind of partners, and these partners are all experts in given fields, right? Litigation, contracts, tax, torts, whatever. And they collaborate together, but then they kind of own their particular space. The reason that's really hard to do in other enterprises, of course, is scale, and the idea of, how do I kind of organize dozens or hundreds of people towards a goal? And I'm not saying you want these teams to totally go away, but what you want to instead is, rather than people who manage people, you want to take somebody who's an expert, who's passionate, who's a builder, who's a leader. And as they hit their limits of what they can do just because of hours in the day, you don't necessarily need to then just give them more people and more teams, and suddenly they just become kind of a manager totally distant from the work. If you can equip them with these tools, as these tools get better, these tools help them scale, you can continue to have them really close to the work. And instead of spending all day kind of dealing with some of the messy human-shaped problems that managers have to figure out, which is a noble pursuit, don't get me wrong, but instead of focusing entirely on that, their job is to orchestrate these tools, orchestrate these agents, orchestrate these workflows. And those workflows give them the kind of scale that previously you might have had to go find 6 engineers to report to this engineer and suddenly make them an engineering manager to give them that kind of scale. So I think you'll see this rise of kind of superpowered individual contributors, superpowered principal leaders inside of organizations who are more impactful than peers, VPs or SVPs who have 100,000 person teams. And that's really interesting to me.
Really interesting. Can't wait for this. This sounds actually like a future I would like to work in.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, super exciting. I will ask you guys one last question. I will make it a quick fire round. So short answers, but I'm really curious. Sam, we'll start with you. And Mosti, get ready because I'll ask you the same question just after that. What is one immediate step every CIO or CISO listening should take tomorrow, or ideally when they're done listening to this, to ensure that their org is actually on the right path towards adopting AI and ideally secure and being responsible while it's doing so? Sam, keep it short. I'm curious to hear from your answer.
Deploy DNS filtering and pick an enterprise vendor. People are going to be using these tools one way or another. Pick a sanctioned one and go with it.
Very actionable. Okay, so DNS filtering, make sure that they only basically have the allow list, so to say, from what I understood earlier from you, and then sign enterprise agreements with one of the AI inference providers, right? Or one of the SaaS tools you might be using that is the main AI tool. Yeah? Great. Mosti, with that, what's your recommendation?
All right. So ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So focus on the opportunities, not the threats. For instance, invest in AI, invest in automation tools to increase the efficiency. That will help the business and the security at the same time and would make the evolvement much more efficient.
Okay, great. So basically make sure you're not left behind by actually actively investing. So don't use the block list for the investment, but use the allow list and actively invest in AI. Great. I have to say, thank you so much. I find this crazy insightful. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure our listeners did too. Mosti, thank you so much for being on, and Sam, to you as well. Thank you for tuning in to the Connectivity Cloud podcast. If you found today's episode valuable, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss future updates. Stay ahead of the curve, stay connected, and stay secure. As always, with Cloudflare.